The Kings were another team that disappointed some fans with their lack of moves. They have dropped into the play-in range and have the second most difficult remaining schedule according to Tankathon. How active was Sacramento at the deadline?
I mean, they were active, but the type of activity that I didn't really get clarity on until trade deadline day, admittedly, was it was all around the edges. And I'm talking like really far around the edges. And that part surprised me. Like it almost feels like, I don't know this, but it almost feels like, you know, these are questions that cross my mind. Did they go to, they actually have a leadership council Mike Brown has created, and I forget who all's in it, but presumably Fox and Sabonis.
Yeah.
And did they go to their leaders and say, what do you want to do here? Because there was a sentiment that literally the top 7, like it went from around the league, people saying Fox, Sabonis, and Murray untouchable. Everybody else up for grabs. Now, did those talks happen? Of course, yes. So that was not inaccurate. But by the end, the 11th hour, it became based on the market, based on what they saw available. We're good with our top 7. Like you're going all the way to 7 and acting as if, you didn't want to touch that. So everything was around the edges. What I tried to write in the column and crystallize for people was that the impact players that they flirted with, those things happened well in advance of the deadline. The Pascal Siakam thing, I still actually would like to learn more about it because I've heard that it was actually incredibly close to happening. And it's an interesting one because I know for a fact that Siakam's camp had not been notified and they were surprised. They were skeptical the entire time that Sac would do the deal because they hadn't heard from Sac. So they wouldn't do it without calling us, would they? And seems like they maybe were on the verge of doing that. Some rumblings that Toronto might have changed the deal and tried to get more at the end, and that's what blew it up. But regardless, later found out, at least I later found out, that Siakam didn't want to be there. Like it's a real hard line. Like he wasn't going to resign. So I think I'd probably argue that, it was better for them not to do that deal. OG Anunoby's the other one where they made more of an internal calculus that he wasn't the guy worth putting everything on the table for and paying $40 million this summer in free agency. Agree or disagree, that was how they saw that. And then there wasn't an impact guy at the deadline. So it became all around the edges, the Kyle Kuzma chatter that had been out there. Again, I didn't really get this crystallized till yesterday, but they had been out on him for a while. Can't exactly say why, but they just weren't going down that road. So the other guys, Royce O'Neal would have really, really helped them.
That was the one that kind of stuck out to me.
Yeah. And at first I was going to say, as I was doing the story, like, all right, based on price tag, you could argue that they should have done what they had to do to get him. But it was a pretty big price tag. Once you figure everything in the 3-team trade with Memphis, Phoenix, and Brooklyn, for one, the 3-team component creates an element where, again, you don't really know what the talks look like. But if you're the Kings, like there was a party going on over here that you couldn't get in on, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't know what it would have taken for the Nets to go the Kings way with that one. But basketball wise, he would have helped. Dorian Finney-Smith was on their radar. I'd reported Caleb Martin to give him a little more offensive juice, in shooting. And DeLon Wright was the other one. So, their fans are certainly disappointed. As you guys know, I live here locally and have constant feedback there. So their fans are frustrated because they are happy that they're probably going to get to the playoffs again. But but the idea of them getting out of the first round looks pretty unlikely.